Good morning, everyone. Pastor David here with our Thursday devotional today. Today, I'm just going to be up front and say I want to talk about obedience, and I'm going to try to keep it to around the same 5 minutes that we normally do, but I have a lot of thoughts and things to say on the subject, so if I'm a little scattered or I go a little over, please be gracious with me. There's a lot I have to say. I may revisit this later, but there's a question that I get asked quite often as a pastor. And the question is this. They say, why does God not do miracles today like he did in the Bible? And there are a few different answers to that. One is I do think that God still interjects supernaturally into our world today. I think often we don't look for it, or we don't bother to see it or to hear his voice. But more than that, I think there is an aspect of truth to this question of why doesn't God interject in a supernatural way today like we see in the Bible. And I think a big part of that answer is lack of obedience. You see, when we look at the Bible, when we look through all the miracles that God did throughout the Old and the New Testament, most of the time when God interjected in a supernatural way, when God did something miraculous, it started with an act of faith and obedience on the part of us. We had to put some skin in the game, as it were. We had to take steps of faith and obedience, and then God was waiting to do his part. He was there and ready, and supernatural things happened. We think of stories like the feeding of the 5,000. We think of stories like the lepers being healed. You know, they had to go down to the river and get in and bathe the 7 times that Jesus told them to. There are all sorts of stories that begin with us taking the first steps of faith and obedience and God coming through. So the question really becomes, why isn't God doing miracles today like we saw in the Bible? Did God suddenly lose his power? Is God suddenly incapable of interjecting into the world in supernatural ways? Well, we know that's not true. So what's the different factor? The different factor is that we are no longer obedient. See, the problem is that we've allowed so many other things to take precedence and priority in our lives. I don't think that it's most Christians intentionally want to be disobedient, or it's a lack of desire to follow Jesus per se. But I think we've just let so many things take priority, whether it's just the busyness of life, or it's sports, or it's jobs, or it's cultural identities or political identities. We give our loyalty, we give our obedience to so many other things first, that when they come into conflict with following Jesus, Jesus often loses out. He's too far down the priority chain. And the truth is, it's gotten to the point where, other pastors and I that I respect, and that we'll go back and forth and we'll share ideas. Do I think I can say this? Do I think I can push my church this far toward Jesus? Because the truth is it's kind of one of those unspoken understandings amongst certain groups of pastors, that if we really tried to push our churches toward following Jesus completely, we wouldn't have jobs anymore. They would get rid of us. They would fire us. It's gotten to that point where, actually taking Jesus seriously, actually following Jesus, has become this thing that's looked at as fanatical or out of touch with reality. And to be fair to church-going people, you're not alone. The fact is, a lot of pastors have become that way. Just a few weeks ago, I was talking to a pastor friend of mine. We had been friends for 15 years. and he had made some comments that were inflammatory and insensitive, and I had just said to him, I said, hey man, like, we're pastors, we represent Jesus all the time. We don't get to pick and choose when we're representing Jesus, when people are looking at us as pastors. And so we have to be extra careful about the things that we say in public forums. And the truth is, he unfriended and blocked me. We had been friends for 15 years, but he did it because he thought I was trying to be manipulative by talking about, I was just throwing out the pastor card, trying to attack him. And the truth is, and why I say this is not to throw that pastor under the bus or anything like that, but the truth is it speaks to our reality now of where we are. He thought I was being manipulative because he couldn't even fathom, he couldn't even imagine a scenario in which someone really believed that, in which someone really took Jesus that seriously, in which someone really believed, hey, we have to live out the things that Jesus teaches us. We have to be conscientious about the way that we represent Jesus. He couldn't imagine a scenario in which someone really lived like that, and so he assumed that I was trying to be manipulative. And that's the sad reality of where we are now as a people when it comes to obedience, is we look at it as this card to be played. We look at it as this thing that we don't really take Jesus seriously. And when we see someone who does, we think, oh, well, they're crazy, or oh, they're fanatical, or oh, they're just trying to work some angle on us. And don't get me wrong, I know plenty of church-going folk who are very faithful. I know a lot of pastors who are very faithful. But we're in the minority now. And that's a sad thing to see. And so my point this morning is not to rake anybody over the coals or browbeat anybody into submission, but to really step back. And we all miss it sometimes. That's okay. I miss it sometimes. I don't mean to imply I'm some holier than thou person. Believe me, I'm not. But I think the difference is, like David had a lot of major problems in the Bible, but he's known as a man after God's own heart. Why? Because he was trying. Man, that's what he was pursuing. He didn't always get it right. He messed up sometimes, but the desire of his heart, the priority of his life was to try to follow God as closely as he could, as often as he could. And so my only point this morning is this: if we want to see incredible things happen, if we want to see revival happen, if we want to see miracles happen, we have to ask ourselves a serious question. We have to be, as Paul says, we have to be sober in our judgment of ourselves. Are we being obedient? Are we being faithful to what Jesus has called us to above all else? I sometimes wonder, when we look at this 400 years of silence between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament, we say, oh, this was this period where God was silent. And I often think to myself, was God really not speaking for 400 years? Or did we just stop listening? Why don't we see miracles today like we did then? Does God no longer have power? Is God no longer working? Or have we failed on our part? Go this week. Ask yourself this question every day and commit yourself each and every day. I'm going to follow Jesus. I'm going to follow Jesus first. I'm going to follow Jesus only. I'm going to do everything that God calls me to do each and every moment of each and every day. I don't care what else is going on. I don't care what anybody else says. I don't care what the reaction is from my culture, from my friends. I am going to follow Jesus, period. And I think maybe you'll find that you see a lot more breakthroughs in your life of God coming through in incredible ways to do incredible things through you as you live in obedience to him. God bless you. We love you. We praise God for you. We hope to see you Sunday in person or online. Go in his grace this week.